Welcome to the Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperative Studies, CLR James Auditorium. In order to ensure a safe and pleasurable experience, we ask that you listen attentively to the following safety announcement. We are pleased to offer you a smoke-free environment. Patrons are also reminded that eating and drinking are not allowed inside the auditorium. The use of flash photography or any other recording device is strictly prohibited. In an unlikely event of an emergency, we ask that you make your way in an orderly manner to the nearest exit. These are located to the front right of the stage and to the top of the stairs. We ask that you take the time now to identify these exits. Once through these exits, proceed to the nearest muster point, which are situated east of the building on the playing field, or to the front western end of the main building. Once at the muster point, please await further instructions from members of our crisis and emergency team. We thank you for your attention and patience, and do enjoy your stay at the college.
You may have your seats. Senator the Honorable Jennifer Baptiste Primus, Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Colin Jordan, Minister of Labour and Social Partner Relations of the Government of Barbados, Dr. Hyacinth Guy, Chairman of the Board of Governors of the Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperative Studies, Mrs. Natalie Willis, Acting Permanent Secretary, Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development, Ms. Kiva Williams, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development, Mrs. Claudia Konertz, Director, International Labour Organization, Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean, Dr. Rhoda Reddock, Chairman of the Professor and Member of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of the Discrimination of all forms of discrimination against women, Mr. Michael Anisette, representative of the Caribbean Congress of Labour, government officials, delegates, presenters, and participants. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the CLR James Auditorium of the Cipriani Labour College. It is our delight to have you here.
Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, Grenada. Ladies and gentlemen, Guyana. Ladies and gentlemen, Suriname. Ladies and gentlemen, Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the inaugural Caribbean Workers Forum. At this time, we'd like to invite our chairman back onto the stage to continue our program.
I now invite the Head of Department for Cooperative Studies, Mr. Colin Bartholomew, to lead us in the cooperative prayer.
Please join me as we recite the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is despair, wait. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
You may have your seats. I now have great pleasure in inviting to address you or to welcome you the distinguished Chairman of the Board of Governors of the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, Dr. Hyacinth Guy.
Senator the Honorable Jennifer Batiste Primus, Minister in the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development, the Honorable Colin Jordan, Minister of Labor and Social Partnership Relations in the Government of Barbados, Her Honor Gillian Joy Bartlett, Member of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago, Ms. Natalie Willis, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development, Ms. Kiva Williams, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development, Ms. Claudia Conyats, Director of the International Labor Organization, Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean, Dr. Rhoda Reddock, Professor and member of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, Mr. Michael Anisette, representative of the Caribbean Congress of Labor, government officials, esteemed representatives of business and labor, Director Dr. Andre Henry of the College, and members of staff of the College, of the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, delegates, presenters, partners, and participants, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. A pleasant good evening to you all, and welcome to the Cipriani College of Labor Studies, Labor and Cooperative Studies, and specifically welcome to the inaugural Caribbean Workers' Forum. This occasion is significant for me as it is the first external activity I am participating in as the new chairman of the Board of Governors of the College. In this regard, I want to thank the Honorable Minister for the confidence that she has reposed in me and in the newly appointed board. We have had our first meeting, and we understand the significance and the important role this college has to play in our society. And we will work to ensure that even as the college remains true to its moorings and its core mandate, it will become even more relevant in addressing the challenges faced by working people in a very dynamic environment. I extend a special welcome to our visitors from overseas, and in particular, the Honorable Colin Jordan, the Distinguished Minister of Labor and Social Partner Relations from Barbados. To all our contributors, to all the participants, thank you for honoring us with your presence here this evening. The college achieved its continuing institutional accreditation last November, and one of the observations of the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago was that it had to make a more significant contribution in the area of research. This observation coincided naturally with the college's own analysis that to serve its core constituency effectively, it had to go beyond the classroom, and it had to ensure that it provided a space for generating ideas that could inform its teaching and learning activities. We have to play a role in shaping the thought processes among our students, thought processes that serve to empower them and empower those students who pass through the halls here at Valsain, in San Fernando, in Tobago, and also online. This is because with self-empowerment will come significant contributions that they will make in shaping their environment. And that environment is in their environment as working people and also as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The college has an important role to play in providing information and evidence and in giving the opportunity to provide voice to the working people of Trinidad and Tobago. It may sound presumptuous, but we believe that it is not beyond our reach. Over the last year, we launched the Alma Francois Institute for Research and Debate, named in honor of the national heroine who recognized and lived the importance of having a voice and exercising it in spite of the circumstances and the environment in which she found herself. Since launching the Institute, we have published an online newsletter, and we plan to start the publication of a refereed journal. It is in this regard that the theme of this Workers' Forum is significant. The theme is Wealth, Productivity, and Social Protection, a conversation on the evolution of the 21st century Caribbean economy and the role of labor and its institutions. The output of this forum will form the basis of the first issue of this journal. And having held conversations with stakeholders on the various issues that trade unions are facing and cooperative movements facing, issues related to pensions, issues related to social protection, migration, retrenchment, and other concerns that are important to working people, we know that together with the stakeholders in the labor and cooperative movements, we can continue to capture the oral and written history of these two important sectors, and possibly create halls of fame to honor and document the contributions of pioneers and the stalwarts. We are grateful for the support of our stakeholders, starting with the fierce commitment of our distinguished alumna, the Honorable Jennifer Batiste Primus, Honorable Minister. And on behalf of the entire college community, we thank you for your ongoing support and commitment. We are also grateful to our partners in this activity. I'm especially encouraged that at a conference which is billed as a workers' forum, we have been able to attract the support not only of workers' organizations who have contributed financially, but also to secure the assistance of corporate Trinidad and Tobago, and we thank you sincerely. Ladies and gentlemen, Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean find themselves at a significant crossroad. There are real threats, but there are also real opportunities, and we can, in forums like these, seek and find solutions that could contribute to greater social justice and equity. The college is determined to play its part. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you again for your presence. I thank you for your contribution and for the participation that you will make over the 3 days of this conference. I wish you all an enjoyable and fruitful conference. Thank you again, and welcome all.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And now it is my pleasure to invite two of our partners to bring greetings. This conference is being held in the context of the centenary celebrations of the International Labour Organization. And in organizing this conference, we have partnered with the Caribbean Congress of Labour, with the ILO Caribbean office, and of course, we are shepherded by our line ministry. So without further ado, I would like to call to the podium the indefatigable, let me say a smaller word, the very special Mr. Michael Anisette. Mike, you had me tying up my tongue. Mr. Anisette is a member of the Administrative Committee of the Caribbean Congress of Labor. He is the General Secretary of the National Trade Union Center, and he is the President General of the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Union. And I would just like to say a personal word of gratitude to Michael for his assistance in mobilizing support in both the labor movement and in corporate Trinidad and Tobago. And I think it speaks to his stature and the respect that he commands, that some of the people who he may sit opposite to and negotiate on behalf of his workers would take his calls and would extend the hand of friendship to his friends. Mr. Michael Anisette.
Thank you, Director. Only hope with all that statement, the corporate will lend support to me the next time around. But having said that, let me do the normal thing and say, all protocol, observe, and get into what I want to do, my styling of speaking. I would have normally I've been asked to do something in writing, but I think I want to do away with that. I want to speak as a trade unionist from my heart, with all the arrows aiming at everyone else. Let me first thank the Cipriani Labor College, the ILO, Caribbean Congress of Labor, and obviously the Ministry of Labor in conceptualizing this whole concept and program. It's the first for the Cipriani Labor College, and it's something that I'm proud of simply because it is something that I've been articulating for a little while, meaning what is the relevance of Cipriani Labor College as an institution, because I do not see Cipriani Labor College as a second choice. I see the Cipriani Labor College as an institution for the working class, and therefore they have a responsibility as an organization, as an institution, to develop the kind of critical thinking and analysis that is necessary for us as we move forward. Because there is this whole question of globalization, artificial intelligence, the question of the computer, and the question of what that does to the world of work. But in these 4 days, I will ask the presenters, I will ask the students, I will ask the trade unionists to sit down and critically look at the world of work. To ask pertinent questions and come up with pertinent solutions. Solutions that really speaks to the reality of what is happening and not necessarily follow the tradition. I want to say something. In the 1930s, America was going through the worst recession. Yes. And they found a solution. But the solution wasn't founded on the question of the traditional, what I want to call fiscal and financial responsibilities. It was founded on new thoughts and new thinking, where the trade union, which was the CIO, the communist movement at that point in time, and the socialists was pushing an agenda and forced the government at that time, Franklin Roosevelt, to make some interventions in a recessionary time that helped propel America to where America is today. And the point that I'm making is that in that recessionary time, the solution wasn't to cut jobs. The solution wasn't to close down any companies. The solution was not to take away any benefits that workers would have gotten. The solution was, at that point in time, to do something that was strange. And what was strange? The government taxed the rich and the business community to finance the 4 core issues that came about in the 1930s, which was the universal wages for workers there, the question of unemployment levy, the question of if you're sick you will get healed, and the final one was to create jobs from the government in order to propel the unemployed into the job market so that the economy can turn around. And the point I want to make, comrades, because we have to think about it, is that that was done in a recessionary time that is worse than what we have at this point in time. So that thinking out your box is necessary, thinking out your box is critical, and I think Cipriani Labour College, right, the intellectuals, the academics, the students who normally lead the march when we're talking about changes, must sit down and grapple with what is happening globally. When we leave this workshop, we must be able to come up with solutions that really speak to the real problems, because we have a responsibility. I do not buy, and I would not buy, the whole question that the increase of productivity, the new systems of doing work should be done in a way where we, as a society and as a people, are less privileged and disadvantaged suffers. Because, you know, the ILO in 1919, with their wisdom, spoke about social justice. And the right to have social justice if the society and the world is to progress. And we're in the 21st century, and that whole question of social justice is still an issue. So the point that I want to make, you know what is amazing to me? I don't know how many people know. There is more people alive than there's more people dead. And 3 minutes of the sun represents a whole year of the electricity that we use, be it from cars, be it from electricity, be it from washing machine, be it from our fridge. Just think about that. It's mind-boggling. And therefore, the critical analysis that I'm speaking about, the right to disagree, the right to ask questions, the right to ask whether or not in this society and this political system that we operated in, whether this is what we want as a people. Is it fair to us as a community? Is it fair to us as workers? And do we have to engage in a kind of conversation that will not talk about changing parties, but about changing the system that speaks to a reality, which is that the system speaks to the communities where the decisions are made, which will affect the communities, and the community is excluded from those decisions simply because we inherit a political system from away that doesn't speak to our cultural realities and who we are as a people. I would want to put that on the table. I wouldn't want to go further because my role is not to give a speech here today. But I want to thank all my brothers and sisters from the Caribbean region. I want to say welcome. I hope that you enjoy your stay in Trinidad and Tobago. I hope that you will bring to bear, and I know there's a common thread, that no matter where you are in the Caribbean, working people are suffering the same kind of problems. And that should tell us something. And therefore, we need to put our collective wisdom together in order for us to solve our solutions. I don't support the view that our solution will be solved by politicians. It has never been, it will never be. The solution will only come about when we as a society, when we as a people take ownership of the issues and come about with solutions that speaks to our realities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anisat. And now it is my pleasure to call on the Director of the International Labour Organization's Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean, Ms. Claudia Cohertz.
Thank you very much, and well, all protocols observed. A very good evening to all of you, and welcome to this first Biennial Workers' Forum to which the ILO is delighted to partner with. I really want to start by congratulating the Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperative Studies for this fantastic initiative. I also want to thank you all for your interest and for joining this important event. I think that this forum could not come at a more timely moment. As the ILO celebrates its 100th anniversary, we rejoice how the ILO's work continues to affect our lives, from the hours we work and rest, to our safety and health at work, our jobs, our wages, our overall working conditions. And yet, as we celebrate our achievements, we're also pressured to assess our role in a very rapidly changing world of work. As news reports overwhelm us with violence, discontent, fear, and division, I'm sure that you, just like me, at times hesitate between remaining up to date or forever turning off the TV to not be deprived of hope. But in the interest of hope, we must look beneath the surface of those depressing news stories. We must understand what's going on, and we must seek to find the formula that promotes dignity, well-being, and progress that can be sustained. And what prompted the establishment of the ILO 100 years ago, though different in shape and form, is also what is underneath the news headings we receive on our phones. A search for social justice, as Michael said, and a conviction that it is a condition to universal and lasting peace and prosperity. But what does this mean in today's realities? How do we secure social justice? How well do our current institutions respond to bringing about that key value of the ILO, or what the ILO stands for? Michael was mentioning the new forces that are transforming the world of work. And of course, we witness all of them, and I know that in the program there's going to be much more discussion about it, but I just want to sort of mention a few elements. Too often, we see that globalization means competition for foreign investment that really leads to a race for the bottom among countries, putting pressure on labor standards, and of course, as we see a digital revolution that has no frontiers, we become more aware that we need a much stronger coherence between international organizations to regulate the increased internationalization of capital, of multinational enterprises, to make sure that we can continue to have a notion of decent work globally in the world. Another thing is that if we're not going to intervene, the digital economy is likely to widen both regional and gender inequalities. And the platform economy, it says, could recreate working conditions that we saw in the 19th century. Now, for sure, we don't want to go back there. But of course, we shouldn't throw the baby with the bathwater. It doesn't mean that technological progress is bad. But managing the impact of technology on the world of work is critical if we want it to work for us, not against us. Similarly, we talk about, I know everybody has certainly heard about the Paris Agreement and about, how the greening of the economy is going to bring such big changes, and it is. But of course the choice is between, it's possibly going to lead, that's what the prognoses say, to 6 million job losses, but it can also create 24 million new jobs. It's all about how we manage the process, how and what kind of choices we make, and how we prepare our societies so that we can make sure that working people are ready to either transition in new occupations or that young people are equipped to innovate, to set up enterprises, and to help realize a green transition. Another very important driving change that we see is, of course, the aging population. In most continents, we really see an aging population, and while, of course, the young population and the need to make sure that they get into jobs continues to be extremely important, we're also going to have to look, as was already mentioned by one of the previous speakers, at our social security systems and at what this is doing, how we can make sure that they continue to be viable, and also that everybody has access to social protection. So, of course, these things mean that we see ourselves in a very, very rapidly changing world of work. We have informality, we have already existing unemployment, and so on. Now, so rather than going forward, when we look at all the problems, we seem defeated by our challenges. And then again, I would say that it doesn't have to be quite so dark. It depends on the choices we make as societies, as policymakers. And there's been discussion about the need for a reinvigorated social contract. I believe we need to take that seriously. The need for some level of redistribution is undeniable. As you were referring, Michael, about 90-30, that was what was happening. We have a lot of inequality in today's world. And so the three dimensions of what is called the Sustainable Development Agenda, the economic, the environmental, and the social, if we look at those three, it seems that people will not accept reforms, either in the environmental or in the economic arena, unless these reforms are accompanied by social reforms that cushion the pain and amplify the gains and make the gains accessible to more people. One of the key takeaways of the report of the Global Commission on the Future of Work and the declaration that was adopted in our conference in June, in the Centenary Conference, was that we have to ensure a human-centered approach that accompanies the forces of change. We have to make sure that people are supported in the transitions in which they find themselves, and trade unions have a very important role to play in this. So I believe that this forum couldn't be more timely. It's extremely important that trade unions can, together with academics, can really look into what are the solutions going forward, and that we can then further take that forward. So you all have an immensely interesting program ahead of us, ahead of yourselves. And I'm sure that all of you will go back to where you came from with a lot of food for thought. I hope very much that you will multiply the discussion, the debate, the discourse on these very important issues. It always seems impossible until it is done, as Nelson Mandela said, and I know that we all can make a difference. Thank you very much.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Christon Joseph to our stage. Christon is a seasoned performer and program coordinator at the Academy of Arts, Letters, Culture and Public Affairs at UTT. He's also the son of the Penguin. Tonight, Christon will perform a medley of Caribbean songs.
Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure being here. Good to be here with you, lovely Caribbean people. And let's enjoy some Caribbean music together, right? Now, a big part of our experience of Caribbean music as a people is interaction. So I hope you'll be so kind as to help me when you can, yeah? Oh, pirates, yes, they rabbi, sold I to the merchant ship. Minutes after they took I, from where? From the bottomless pit. But my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption songs, redemption songs, songs of freedom, these songs of freedom. Well, it's the strangest feeling I'm feeling. Oh, Jalo, we will always believe in. Though you may think my faith is in vain, till Shiloh we chant Rastafari's name. Well, I'm living while I'm living to the Father I will pray. Only He know how we get through every day. Hardly I came the price, I'm a leg we have to pay. While our leaders play, all I see, people are rip and a rap, all a bribe. Thief never love to see thief with long bag. No love for the people who are suffer real bad. Another told to the pole, may God help his soul. What is to stop the youth from get out of control? Hold up our education, still now on a payroll. The clothes on the back of countless eye hole. Could go on and on, the fool has never been. I could go on and on, the fool has never. I could go on and on, what? I could go on and on. The fool has never been told. From a baby, they telling me, do pass people just so. Anywhere that you go, tell them howdy. Don't play proudy. I say, what's the reason, mommy? Is then she tell me what she say. All are we is one family. 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 What you got to do? Move right, hold tight, just so let me show them how we does go. Move right, hold tight, just so show them how family does go. Family, li, 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 li. With me, family, li, 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 li. When we come to play, li, 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 li. We mash up bet, we mash up dance, we like a party. Eh? How we going? We don't see skin, we don't see color. We see strength, we see power, we don't see race, one or the other. One see on this earth, he is my brother. Let me tell you one time, family is family, and that's from God and bloodline. Anytime we see we family, we got to say one time, oh, we got to stay with each other all the time, fretting with we family, with we family, and when we come to play, we don't see fete, we don't see, we like a, now everybody jumping up together, together, waving up together, winding down together. Tell them solidarity forever. Let's have a party, a Caribbean party, the entire region together in one big jam down fiesta, a Caribbean connection, a regional vibration. I say we jamming to the sounds of the Caribbean, we grooving to calypso and steel pan. Whoa, 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 whoa. That is your part. What? One more. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Christon Joseph. The Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies is unique among tertiary education institutions for many reasons. This school was founded as a result of extensive consultations by our first Prime Minister, Dr. the Right Honorable Eric Williams, with representatives of the labor movement. Dr. Williams had a vision of the people sector in Trinidad and Tobago. And the college is also unique because it doesn't fall under the Ministry of Education. The college falls under the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development. And the Ministry of Labor is also responsible for cooperative development. And the college has a board of 9, 4 of which are members of the labor movement. And the college is honored, I think, to have as its line minister an alumna, Senator the Honorable Jennifer Baptiste Primus, who herself was, as my chairman said, a fierce fighter for workers' rights. And I am grateful to her as director of the college that she's brought that fierce fight in a time of economic challenge in the country to protect and to guarantee not just the existence, but the sustainability and the growth of the college. I want to thank her as my boss, and I dare say my friend, although this afternoon, let me tell you a story. When I greeted her, we normally start with a handshake, and then I would get a kiss. And I said, I got the handshake, and I said, that is all I'm getting? And she said, we will see later. So I guess I'm on trial. But my minister allows me to take some risks. She puts her political capital on the line. and I am extremely grateful for that, ma'am. So without further ado, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce the Honorable Jennifer Batiste Primus.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, who happens to be the director of this college, Dr. Andre Henry. And all I would say is, do not believe everything you hear. The Honorable, good, much better. The Honorable Colin Jordan, my colleague, Minister of Labour and Social Partnership Relations from the Government of Barbados. It's really nice to see you again. We have been seeing each other quite regularly for this year. June, we were in Barbados with you all, and then we were in Geneva. Her Honor, Gillian Joy Bartlett, the newest member, one of the newest members to the Industrial Court, and someone of whom I'm very proud. Very proud. I vigorously supported this recommendation. Gillian has a rich history from the trade union movement, the former General Secretary of the National Union of Government and Federated Workers. Dr. Hyacinth Guy, Chairman of the Board of Governors of this college. Our PS, hard-working, petite but hard-working, Miss Natalie Willis, and our Deputy PS, another hard-working lady from our ministry, Miss Kiva Williams. My good friend, Miss Claudia Cohen-Arts, who is the director of the International Labour Organization, Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean. Someone whom I've known for so many years. We go back about 30 years or more. Yeah. Working Women for Social Progress. Adafi, my daughter, remember those days. She remembered those days. I warmly recognize Dr. Rhoda Reddock, professor and member of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and may I publicly congratulate you. Professor Rhoda Reddock had overwhelming support in our bid for this position. My good friend and combatant, comrade, Michael Anizet, fearless. He's representing the Caribbean Congress of Labour here this evening. He is also the president of the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union. He is also the general secretary of the National Trade Union Center. He is also a member of the board of governors of this college, and I warmly welcome him. My advisor, Ms. Heather Augustine Cornwall, government officials, esteemed representatives of business and labor, director and members of the staff of Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. In my mindset, it remains Cipriani Labor College. So every time I think Cipriani Labor College, and then I have to remember it's and Cooperative Studies. Delegates, presenters, partners, participants, ladies and gentlemen, a blessed, well, it's night. Good night to everyone. This Caribbean Workers Forum takes place in a very special month for Trinidad and Tobago, because this month we celebrate our independence on the 31st of August. So we have 3 important activities taking place this month: this Caribbean Workers Forum and CariFesta. The opening of CariFesta is next Friday. I was sharing it with my colleague, the Minister of Labour of Barbados. So we have the Caribbean Workers Forum, immediately followed by CariFesta, and immediately followed by our independence. So August is very significant this year. It is a great pleasure for me to add my words of welcome to those of you who are here with us from the Caribbean. I want to start by again thanking Dr. Guy for accepting the government's offer to chair the board of this college. As an alumna of the college, a former trade unionist, and now line minister for an institution where I gained such rich experience, I am now responsible to contributing to the sustainability and growth of this college, which is very close to my heart. I'm convinced that the historic mission for which this college was established remains relevant today, and it has taken on an even greater sense of urgency given the many challenges faced by working people. I am confident that under the guidance of the steady hand and leadership of Dr. Guy and her fellow governors, that the college will continue to grow from strength to strength. I want to extend a warm welcome to Trinidad and Tobago and the college, to my colleague, Minister of Labour, the Honourable Colin Jordan. I thank him for agreeing to share with us the experiences of Barbados with regards to social partnership and dialogue, and look forward to your presentation tomorrow morning. I also bring greetings on behalf of the government from the Honourable Prime Minister, and we know that our Prime Minister enjoys a very close relationship with your Prime Minister, and he has asked me to have you pass on his best wishes to your Honourable Prime Minister. I also wish to congratulate the staff of the college on this activity. My charge to the Board of Directors and to the Director of the college is clear. This institution has a continuing role to play in the social and economic development of our country, and I dare say the Caribbean region. The role is not confined to empowering working people, but I strongly believe there is need for discussions, ideas, and policy prescriptions that are developed with mainstream sensitivity to and the active participation of working people. This conference is being held in the context and as part of the Trinidad and Tobago's observance of the centenary of the International Labour Organization. Earlier this year, I appointed a multi-party committee with representatives from the labor movement, the Employers Consultative Association, and other stakeholders, including this college. The appointment of the committee was a demonstration of the recognition by the government and the Ministry of Labour in particular, which I have the honor to lead, to this very important work that the ILO has been doing and is continuing to do in Trinidad and Tobago. In this regard, I want to thank the Director of the Caribbean Office for her and her office support for the continued improvement in labor administration in the country in general and for their generosity in contributing to the present conference. I also want to publicly thank the Director and her staff. Not a single activity of the ministry in which we are engaged that the ILO is not a part of. All our consultations, the ILO continue to partner with us, and we are indeed very grateful. This forum, therefore, takes place in the context of those celebrations. Each member state of the ILO was asked as part of the observance of the centenary, to conduct 4 conversations. As part of our effort at the ministry to ensure the widest possible inclusion in our work, the first 2 conversations, 1, the organization of work and production, financing and innovation, preparing for the future of work, and 2, the governance of work, legislating the decent work agenda, were held in Tobago last month with the collaboration of the Tobago House of Assembly. The other 2 conversations, work and society, happy workers, happy society, and decent jobs for all, job security in an uncertain economy, are woven into this forum. The work of the ILO, as demonstrated by these conversations, are only one part of the strands that inform the government's agenda to reform and modernize the industrial relations systems in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is meant to ensure equity and fairness while supporting social and economic development and justice. There's a confluence of many trends that continue to impact on working people and the world of work in many ways that had not been anticipated nor planned for. The overwhelming impact of the confluence is that working people are becoming even more vulnerable. This vulnerability is manifested in many ways. Vulnerability to poverty, vulnerability to exploitation, marginalization in society, loss of or inadequate social protection, compromise of fundamental rights at work. There are, in a sense, global trends, but in the case of Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean, there are challenges that are specific to us that have the impact of intensifying and multiplying the general trends. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades all, we are aware that a piecemeal tinkering around the edges is not the responsible response to this rapidly changing operating environment. The industrial relations framework of a country must be able to keep pace with the global and local imperatives. In fact, if we are to lay a basis for high productivity and competitiveness, we have to be anticipatory in our policy making. As we would have noted, one of the conversations for the observance of the ILO centenary is the governance of work, legislating the decent work agenda. I venture to state that our approach as a government has been to address industrial relations system as an integral part of the governance framework of the country. As a small open society with an economy that is highly dependent on international trade, we have to address these imperatives. But at the same time, we have a moral obligation to make sure that the system is fair and transparent and provides a basis for equity and social justice. As the Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development, along with our executive management team, we have a very small management team at the level of the ministry, which I am proud to lead, with our permanent secretary, our deputy permanent secretary, our senior legal officer, our director of human resources, my advisor, and myself. So it's not about me as the minister, it's about teamwork that we have been able to achieve many of the mandates that have been set. As a team, we have been pursuing an ambitious agenda to understand these trends, to anticipate them, and to put in place policy and legislation that would mitigate any negative impacts and create an environment in which working people can thrive. Over the course of this administration, we have taken a strategic approach to reframing and modernizing the industrial relations policy and legislative framework. Permit me to share some highlights of this program. This is important to understand the opportunity presented by this conference to contribute to this important work. With regards to industrial relations, the core of our industrial relations system in Trinidad and Tobago is the Industrial Relations Act, Chapter 8801. The basis of good policy and good legislation is strong stakeholder buy-in. Starting in 2016, shortly after taking office, as a matter of fact, we assumed office in September 2015, and by January 2016, we were hosting our very first consultation on the reform of the Cooperatives Act. So shortly after taking office, we set about a process of extensive consultations. We recognized that the IRA in particular stirs strong emotions, and that we had a responsibility to work especially diligently to bring stakeholders together for a consensus. I know that some of my colleagues from the trade union movement have accused me of only consulting. From 2016 to present, we have engaged in a historic 21 consultations, and we have made advancement. I will share a few with you. On February 22nd and 23rd and April 8 in 2016, the ministry conducted a national tripartite stakeholder consultation on the Industrial Relations Act over a course of 3 days. At the end of that conference, at the end of that consultation, we invited further comments from the stakeholders. The ministry established a tripartite working group, and that working group came up with a draft policy. And that draft policy was submitted to Cabinet in January 2017 for consideration and approval. And Cabinet on the 16th of November 2017 referred that draft policy to the National Tripartite Advisory Council, of which my good friend, Comrade Anisette, is also a member. That document has not yet engaged the NTAC's attention, but I am quite sure within a short space of time before the ending of this year, NTAC's comments will be concluded on that draft policy, and therefore it will go back to Cabinet. But just to indicate to you, 2 issues are embraced in that draft policy. One speaks to the reduction of the time for the recognition of trade unions. It is not unusual in Trinidad and Tobago for a trade union to wait for 5 years for recognition. In some cases, more than 5 years. At the personal level, I can't understand it because the recognition board comprises of many trade unionists on that board. So that we have proposed a reduction of time, that a trade union, within a 6-month period, a trade union must be granted recognition. So that is part of that policy. The other aspect of that policy has to do with domestic workers and recognizing domestic workers as workers. The one aspect of the recommendation, and those recommendations resulted from the work of the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee, of which Dr. Hyacinth Guy is the chair of that committee. And just to give you a bit of background to those recommendations before the Cabinet that NTAC has to consider, when I became the minister, I did a whole lot of reading. I spent months reading, just getting a feel of what transpired before. And I stumbled upon a report from Dr. Hyacinth Guy in her capacity as the chair of the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee. And that report would have been submitted to the line minister, I think in 2014. But nothing was done with those recommendations. When I read those recommendations and recognized the volume of work and effort that went into those recommendations, I accepted that I did not have to go and recreate the wheel, and therefore went forward with those recommendations that form part of the draft policy. So that that is the Industrial Relations Act, the amendment to the Industrial Relations Act. With regards to the retrenchment and severance benefit, relatedly, we have given attention to the retrenchment and severance benefits regime. This is another policy plank that brings into sharp relief the need to balance good policy with the interests of stakeholders. And for those of you from the Caribbean who may not be aware, we had a rather painful and unfortunate experience in this country where ArcelorMittal closed its operations and more than 600 workers were put on the breadline. But that was not all. Up to this day, as I speak to you, those 600 plus workers have never received 1 cent in benefits. And therefore, when that situation occurred, the team at the ministry and I decided to move up the consultation on the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act, and that became a priority, so that on May 18, 2016, we hosted a consultation on the reform of the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act. Subsequent to that consultation, a working group was established, and they developed a draft policy position paper for the amendment of this legislation. And that draft policy was submitted to Cabinet in January 2017 for consideration, and Cabinet referred that draft policy to the National Tripartite Advisory Council, where I am very happy to share that the NTAC completed its consideration of this piece of legislation to be amended, and the matter is to be sent back to Cabinet within the next week or two. Then we looked at cooperatives. The first Prime Minister of our country, Dr. the Right Honorable Eric Eustace Williams, at the time of independence, articulated the concept of the people's sector. This concept remains relevant almost 60 years on. For Dr. Williams, the cooperative sector had the potential to mobilize the assets of the community, and in particular, the working class. This nexus between cooperatives and the labor movement is evidenced in the formal renaming of this institution from the Cipriani Labor College to the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. The development of a modern policy framework for the cooperative sector and the cooperative revision and the revision of the Cooperative Act has been one of our priorities. Now, there have been many ups and downs with regards to this policy. The first policy was passed by the Cabinet in 2017, but subsequent to that, we received the comments of the ILO, which took us down a path of reviewing that policy, and I'm happy to say that the review of that policy and also the amendment of the Act will be considered at the final consultation to be held on Wednesday, the 11th of September, where we will invite stakeholders to assemble at a national consultation on the revised policy on cooperatives and amendments to the Cooperative Society Act, Chapter 8103. Ladies and gentlemen, we also looked at contract labor and non-standard forms of employment. We have recognized that as the nature of work changes, the nature of employment is also changing. The trend to contract labor and non-standard forms of employment will continue and can be expected to intensify. We have identified the main economic, financial, social environmental factors that have contributed to the emergence and growth of contract employment in Trinidad and Tobago. As a matter of fact, the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee also submitted a document on this very important issue. We held a consultation on contract labor. We requested further comments from the stakeholders, and a report was submitted to Cabinet in May 2017. And Cabinet, on the 5th of October, agreed to the development of a national workplace policy on contract employment in government ministries, departments, and statutory authorities by the ministry. The development of this policy is currently before a Cabinet-appointed committee. So that, ladies and gentlemen, we view the amendment of these various pieces of legislation as critical. In addition to these core areas that affect the world of work, the ministry has been working very, very hard to improve other areas that would positively impact on the well-being of the working class. And permit me to share with you all. We have held consultations on the amendments of the Trade Union Act, and that draft policy is in active progress. On the Workmen Compensation Act, Chapter 8805, that is also a work in progress. On the private security legislation, a report was submitted and we await further directions. Sexual harassment consultation, which resulted in a national workplace policy on sexual harassment. The Cabinet approved that policy, and that policy was laid in our Parliament on the 8th of March this year, International Women's Day. The Trade Unions Act, the draft policy, is a work in progress. We also consulted on the Employment Standards Bill, and that is formally Basic Terms and Conditions of Work Code. We feel very strongly that all workers in Trinidad and Tobago, wherever they go for a job, a worker must enjoy certain basic terms and conditions of employment in order to limit the high levels of exploitation that we know takes place. We also looked at the Employment Exchange Act, the Foreign Labor Contracts Act, Recruiting of Workers Act, and Friendly Societies. And last by no means, ladies and gentlemen, we also looked at the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperatives. And I wish to share with you briefly what we have done so far. We held the first consultation on the 25th of January 2017. The comments from the stakeholders were collated into a draft policy paper, and this paper was submitted to Cabinet in May 2017. Cabinet approved the draft policy position paper in July 2017. Following that approval, Cabinet forwarded that draft policy to the Chief Parliamentary Council for the development of a draft bill. That draft Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies Bill of 2018 was forwarded to all the stakeholders, such as the college itself, the directors and board of governors, the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Finance, just to mention a few of our stakeholders. Following these requests for comments, the cooperative, the draft Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies Bill was submitted to the ministry. We took a decision at the executive team level that because we have a new board in place, we should allow the new board to have a look at this draft bill before going forward with it to the to the Parliament, and in that context, Madam Chair, just this afternoon after lunch, I would have signed off that letter prepared by the Permanent Secretary to forward the piece of legislation for you and your board to consider. And I trust that you all will put it as a priority, because we would like to submit it to Cabinet by the ending of August. I think Madam Chair is familiar with me by now. I always want everything yesterday. And ladies and gentlemen, so that is where we are with regards to Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperatives. I have taken the opportunity to share a bit of the very extensive work program with you, not necessarily to impress you, but to lay a foundation so that you could understand that the work that you will be conducting over the next 3 days would assist us at the ministry in the reform and modernization of the industrial relations system in the country. From my perspective, in approaching policy development, there are two interrelated principles that I believe we must satisfy. And I believe that this forum and its outputs can be a very useful vehicle. Firstly, good policy making must be evidence-based. The complexities of the issues faced in the world of work, the probability of unintended negative consequences, the risks and vulnerabilities facing working people mean that policy development and policy formation cannot be left to chance. It is important to understand what are the consequences on individuals, groups, and the wider society of policy initiatives. It is my belief, and I would even dare to say, it is my mandate to you as delegates to see your participation more than a mere academic exercise, but as an opportunity to inform, to shape, and contribute to needed intellectual output. Secondly, in a modern society with increasingly sophisticated partners, there is an indispensable need for stakeholder involvement and participation in policy development. The track record of this ministry over the last 4 years has demonstrated a very firm commitment to the involvement of stakeholders in framing policy. Indeed, every policy proposal or piece of draft legislation has been informed by meaningful, rigorous, and robust stakeholder consultations. As I said earlier, I have been accused of only engaging in consultation, but I would argue that consultation is the bedrock of not only good governance, but good policy formulation. I believe that the gathering of so many stakeholders who have an interest in the world of work, in particular and the development of a Caribbean society in general, is an ideal opportunity to harvest ideas. Part of my clear guidance to the college is that we must approach our work from the whole of government approach, wherein we seek to leverage resources for the good of the whole. The history of economic development has revealed some very disturbing trends. In the last 40 years, there has been a marked shift in economic development, whereby the gains in productivity brought about by advances in technology and, more importantly, investments in human capital are not being reflected in gains in workers' wages and workers' protections. The shift from wage-led growth to profit-led growth has implications for public policy as well as the well-being of workers themselves. As I noted earlier, one of the conversations that the ILO encouraged member states to have as part of the centenary celebration is work and society. Happy workers, happy society. The well-being of workers is an indicator of a just society, but it's also a barometer of a stable society. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has invested heavily in this conference. I believe it is worthwhile. It is a worthwhile investment, and I look forward to being proved right in this regard. All I ask is that you engage in your discussions and deliberations fearlessly, and that you make every effort to develop and share ideas that are practical, relevant, and appropriate, as my comrade Anisette indicated in his discourse earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, friends from the Caribbean, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you, and I look forward to seeing the outcome of your deliberations over the next 3 days. I thank you.
Senator the Honorable Jennifer Batiste-Primus. I now have the pleasure to call on Mr. Atkins O. Vidal, the coordinator of the Elma Francois Institute for Research and Debate, to move the vote of thanks. Mr. Vidal.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The Honorable Colin Jordan, Minister of Labour and Social Partnership Relations, Government of Barbados. Her Honor, Deborah Thomas Felix, President of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago, and other members of the Court. Ms. Natalie Willis, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development. Ms. Kiva Williams, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development. You know, I'm looking at this list here and we're missing someone on the list, right? Senator the Honorable Jennifer Batiste-Primus, Minister of Labour, Small and Small Enterprise Development. Ms. Claudia Conyers, Director, International Labour Organization, Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean. Dr. Hyacinth Guy, Chairman of the Board of Governors of the Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperative Studies. Dr. Rhoda Reddock, Professor and Member of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Mr. Michael Anisette, and I'm only using one comrade, forgive me, representative of the Caribbean Congress of Labour. Government officials, esteemed representatives of business and labour, Director Dr. Andre Vincent Henry, members of staff of the Cipriani College of Labour and Cooperative Studies, delegates, presenters, partners, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Right. So my task is, to be cliched, a very simple one, and that is to say thank you. Pulling this off, and we're not finished yet, this is just the start, has been an interesting journey. And I want to start by thanking the director of the college, simply because it is difficult sometimes for people to see things that are not there. It is difficult for you to see something that has not yet happened. It takes something for someone to believe in something that has not happened before. And so, for us to have something like this at this college is an indication to me of the kind of visionary leadership that we now have at the college. And I want to say thank you to the director for believing in this. Members of staff who have dedicated hours on end. Few of us were here until 11 last night. We were here until 11 the night before. And I know that they're still not sure on whether we're paying overtime or what the situation is, but they stayed with me. So I wasn't here by myself late into the night. We have some new graphic artists who learned the hard way, baptism of fire, that academics have a different understanding of what a final edited document is compared with everybody else. So every morning we'd wake up and we'd say, no, I think this should be a little different, and we could probably see this a little different. So we go back to the graphic artist. And I'm not sure, I haven't been told what the conversations have been in my absence, but they've always complied, and we're very grateful for the documents that they've helped us to produce. There's one in particular, not on staff, who we call on at the 99th hour, one who's responsible for our logo, our main logo, which was then complemented by another one of our young members of staff, also graphic artists. And this is fantastic work here, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank some of our sponsors. And there's some interesting names in sponsorship, because when you hear sponsorship, you start to think companies up here. I want to start with some of the important people, because if you have $10 and I ask you for $5 and you give me $7, then that is a much bigger contribution than somebody who has 50 and gives me 10. And I want to thank Comrade Balkaran, who has given of his time and whose contribution we will have the pleasure of engaging in on Saturday. Mr. Balkaran, thank you very much. He sponsored our lunch, by the way. He's cooking, so. Mr. Williams, a student, small contractor, but felt that this was important enough that he dip in his own pocket to contribute to what we're doing here today. So, Comrade Williams, I know you're somewhere in the audience. The Amalgamated Workers Union, the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union. How often do we hear that? We have an event and our sponsors include members of the trade union movement. Comrades, thank you very much. And, well, comrade, you've given me you have to allow me to lead into the thing. We have dignitaries among the membership of NUGFW. We can't just put them with everybody else just like that. You have to single them out. So, when we first started, and I approached the comrade to discuss it, I can't think of a time, and there's some comrades in the trade union movement who I know very well, and I'm not very familiar with her or not, I have to admit that. But at no point in time did the comrade ever make me feel as if we had not been comrades arms in arms for years and years and years. And I felt that it was important for us to single out, particularly as we have Professor Reddock in here, that in a movement dominated by men, that we have so many women as well who play such a critical role in the development of the movement. Chairman, sometimes you have to allow a story to unfold. Okay. I want to thank members of the Cooperative and Credit Union movement. RAND Credit Union, I know I saw some of the members coming in earlier. Thank you very much. Some other companies, Massey Group, we could clap at the end of each one, and it's up to you. Aston Enterprises Limited, Bryden PI, this stage, Geraldo Vieira Jr. and his team. And of course, if we were to have a designation or a platinum sponsor, the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development. But most importantly, I want to thank those of you who felt it was important enough to register for a conference like this. When I had first thrown out the idea to some persons, the comments I got and in particular, there's one in particular, it's trade unionists, it's workers. Why you want to talk about these high things and these technical things? Workers not interested in that. That was the comment. But I felt, and because I've known, and because I've walked among workers, and because if you sit in the barber shop and you listen properly, if when you drive in the taxi you listen properly, if when you're in the grocery you listen properly, workers and ordinary people talk about complex policy issues all the time. And it is important for us to give space to that. And that is what this conference represents. We're giving space to ordinary people to have complex conversations about those things which affect them, where they live and where they work. And so I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the opportunity to be with us here over the next few days. And I want to close by saying, comrades, the stage is not accidental nor incidental. When they push us and we don't move, and when workers collectively withstand all of the pressure and all of the oppression, it's because our house is built on rock and not sand. And so our stage reflects that. And I want to say to you, welcome to the first Caribbean Workers Forum, and its success depends not just on myself or my team, but on the contributions from every single one of us. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
You see,
I didn't buff him much. Just a little.
Yeah. You see, he buffed me when I remind him to say NUGFW, because Minister, although you stole her from us and put her on the court, but you forgot to mention that our reception this evening is hosted by Angostura Limited. And I'm very pleased to have Mr. Ramin Mohammed here. But the reason I'm holding him here, I'm getting a little paternal. This is a good man. This is a good man. And I don't want to be condescending, and I hope it's not misunderstood, because you don't do these things as an academic, but this is a good man. And when I think of when Ian Daniel, the head of labor studies, said, you know, we need to reactivate the center. We need to make sure that the college gives voice. I said, well, who will do it? And he told me Atkins would. And when I approached Atkins, there was no promise of increased remuneration. It was just a promise of a lot of hard work. And in 15 months, the transformation he has made, I want you to stand with me and give him a round of applause. This is a good man. Minister, I just want you to know that those graphic artists he spoke about are OJTs, but we don't call them OJTs, we call them our young professionals. And I want to thank the on-the-job training program, our whole-of-government approach, for making them available to us. We're going to be treated now by one of my favorite musical genres here in Trinidad and Tobago, the sweet songs of Tassa. I'm going to ask you to remain seated. We are going to have our reception, as I said, hosted by Angostura on the ground floor. We just, as you come out, make a right and continue and to the reception. So while you remain seated, while the audience remains seated as the Tassa groups comes in, I will ask the honorable ministers and our protocol list to, I will escort you over.